Once, on a cold and rainy evening in London, a young couple was window shopping, and they came upon a fine china shop. Their eyes fell upon the most beautiful little teacup. They could not help but stare. Suddenly, it jumped up and it began to speak. "So you think I'm beautiful? I haven't always been this beautiful. Let me tell you how I came to be. There was a time when I was just a big mushy ball of red clay. That's when I met the master potter. First, he studied me as if he was looking right through me. And then the master potter grabbed me, and he rolled me, and he patted me, and he threw me down over and over again until I finally yelled, 'Let me alone!' But he only smiled. He said, 'Not yet.' Next, the master potter plopped me onto this spinning wheel. It was spun around and around and around and around until finally I shouted at the top of my lungs, 'Stop, please, stop! I'm getting dizzy.' But the master potter only smiled, and he shook his head, and he said, 'Not yet.' Suddenly he took me off of that wheel, and he placed me into this big, bad, fiery furnace. I have never felt such discomfort. I wondered why he would do this to me. So I yelled and I knocked on the door, but I could see through the opening. I could read his lips as he shook his head and he said, 'Not yet.' Finally, the door opened and he sat me on the shelf and I began to cool. 'Oh, that is better,' I said. But just as I began to feel the great relief, my master began to brush and paint all over me. Oh, the fumes, they were just horrible. Oh, stop, please, please, please. But he shook his head and he calmly said, 'Not yet.' And then when I thought it just couldn't get any worse, he put me back into that big, bad, fiery furnace again. But this time, he turned the heat way, way up. It was hotter than the first time. It was twice as hot. And I just knew I would die. I begged this time. I pleaded. I screamed. I cried, knocking on the door. All the time, I could see him through that opening, shaking his head and simply saying, 'Not yet.' There was no hope. I knew I would never make it. I was just about ready to give up when suddenly the door opened. He looked inside, examining me carefully, smiling proudly the whole time. He mentioned for me to come out. He held up a mirror in front of me, saying, 'Look at yourself.' I did. That's not me. It couldn't possibly be me. Why, I'm beautiful. My master potter began to explain. I know it hurts to be rolled and patted, but if I would have just left you, you would have dried up. I know it made you dizzy to spin on the wheel, but without it, you would have crumbled. And I know that it was hot in the oven, but if I hadn't put you there, you would have cracked. And I know the fumes were bad when I painted you, but if I hadn't done it, you would have had no color in your life. And if I hadn't placed you in that second hotter oven, you would have never survived long, because the hardness would have never held. But now you're finished. Now you are everything I would dreamed you would be. Now you're my masterpiece. The end.